Welcome to the Superbound podcast, where vision led entrepreneurs learn to build a generous business without sacrificing what matters most. You are listening to episode 346, Planning as an Act of Self Investment. Hello and welcome. So, I've done a lot of episodes about weekly planning, quarterly planning, annual planning. You can head to besuperbound.com/podcast and search for all of the content about planning. But today, I want to talk about planning from a little bit of a different perspective because one of the things I do with a lot of my VIP clients is really figure out how they are going to juggle the plan that they have for their business, for their career, for their leadership responsibilities, and the reality of what they and their human lives need. I think sometimes we plan, and we've been taught to. This is not a reflection or a judgment on you if you plan this way, but I think many of us have been taught to plan in ways that feel a little robotic. Um, you know, it's all about willpower. It's about saying, this is the plan. I'm going to usually structure my week. I'm going to do that after, a big cup of coffee when I'm feeling motivated and I'm feeling excited. And then I'm just going to have things stacked one on top of the other for the whole week. And I'm going to get it all done. And I'm going to be a champion and a hero. There are definitely people who stick to a calendar and they are precise about it. And that is just how it is. But what I have found over the years is working with business owners, working with leaders, there are so many other factors that come up in a work week that may not actually fit into some of the traditional planning styles and methodologies. So I did an episode, I want to say it was episode 326 about the power of planning and, why planning is so important. But today I really want to talk about planning in a way that feels like self-investment and not self-sacrifice. So I have shared the way that I tend to plan my daily life, my weekly life. I have a color-coded calendar system. I have, one color for coaching clients, anything that is a meeting where I need to be in the office at my desk, mentally, emotionally prepared, and totally focused with all of my attention and energy on someone, or sometimes like a podcast. So it requires my full presence, my full energy. Then I have things on my calendar that are to do with my family life, my kids' activities. They have a lot of them now. Somehow I did not plan this very well, I suppose, but they have a lot more activities than they've ever had before. So those things go on the calendar. Someone's got to be there to pick them up from school, that sort of thing. Things that Steve and I might be doing for our relationship, times where we are going to take half a day and go drive to our favorite restaurant and have a nice lunch. We did that last week. It was really fun. And then there's time that I need for my own high level thinking. The CEO Fridays are one of my favorite ways of building in, I call it like strategic rest. You think about an elite athlete has to have a recovery day. But I also, on those days, I'm not just resting, I'm very often pouring back into my own well of inspiration. It's when I do a lot of my reading, it's where I might do extended spiritual practice. It is the day where I fill my energy so that I'm not walking into the weekend exhausted for my family, and I'm not walking into the next week exhausted for the work that I want to do, that I feel called to do. So it is really important to kind of figure out your own groove. And I think what I often notice is that people will build out their week in kind of a weird priority order. So what I mean by that is, the meetings will go on the calendar first. The big projects we have to move forward, those will go on the calendar first. And then maybe if there's time, I'll get to a workout. Or maybe if there's time, I will do something for my social life. Maybe if there's time, I'll sleep 8 hours a day. And I know that there are seasons of our life where that is how it has to be. I am not going to sit here and say that there have not been periods of my work life where I have slept a little less, where I've worked a little bit more. That is definitely true. And I know that's true for a lot of my clients. So I want to be really clear that I'm not saying you have to have some perfectly balanced schedule. I'm not actually even a fan of the word balance because I think it gives some kind of perfectionistic, crystal clear thing that the schedule is always perfectly in balance. It really isn't. It never is. But I was talking about this yesterday with someone. But it doesn't mean that because you might not have an hour to do your workout because of everything else that's going on, do you have 10 minutes to walk around the block? Do you have 5 minutes to get on the floor and stretch before bed? Can you do something? Can you do one of those small sustaining rituals that we talk about in the Super Abound book? Something that makes your life better, that pours back into you, something that is good for you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or with your relationships with others or your relationship with yourself. Ideally, as business owners, as leaders, as people who are leading visionary lives, I think sometimes we don't always trend towards burning out because we're doing misaligned things. Often this was kind of my story. When I burnt out, I was not living a life I would say was misaligned with the work I was doing. It wasn't like coming home going, oh, I can't stand my work. I can't stand my clients. Like I loved what I was doing. I loved the people I was working with. It felt very aligned with my energy. But what it lacked was grounded, centered inner support. I lacked nutrition. I lacked sleep. I lacked probably drinking enough water. So I think planning as an act of self-investment means that you don't diminish or put off the things that actually contribute to your well-being. This is another reason I talk about self-investment. Sometimes people are like, what is that? Self-investment is the way that I talk about self-care. But self-care often feels to many people like this kind of light, dreamy thing, which it can be. But investment has a certain gravity to it. When you invest with your money, it means you are doing something that you're hoping is going to compound over time, that it's going to pay you dividends. It's going to, it's an investment in your future, ideally, if you do it right, if you do it well, and you're lucky enough at least for money. But when we're self-investing, it's almost always going to return tenfold whatever you invested. So I shared on Instagram this week, I'm doing I'll call it a nutritional reset. So I'm doing a bit of a cleanse program. It has some herbal things. It has some food, nutritional suggestions. I am a former Chinese medicine practitioner, so I do not love the idea of cleansing and detoxing because it makes it sound like our bodies are dirty and bad and like we're full of toxins and all of this stuff. I don't really resonate with that. And I don't think that approach to nutrition is really great. But this is an opportunity, and the reason that I'm doing it, I've roped Steve into, but the reason we're doing it is because sometimes I do lean on the same five foods. If I am in the middle of a busy day, maybe I haven't been planning with my own self investment in mind, and I have a day that's stacked back to back to back. Doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's so easy to just go into the cupboard, eat some crackers, have some cheese, and call that lunch. It's not bad. It's not the worst, but I know that probably if I had put a little more thought and time and checked in with my body, there might be some other missing nutrients that would really support me through the rest of the day. Same thing. I love coffee. I really love it. And I have some very good coffee in my world. So it is not unusual for me to reach for a second cup of coffee in the day when I feel a little tired, instead of just like maybe take 5 minutes to close my eyes, maybe lay on the floor, do a little yoga. I will reach for the quick fix so often, it's just a pattern. And the reset was a way of just checking in with that. We're on day 3 right now, I believe. It's actually going well. I did see some chocolate that I really wanted to reach in and grab, but so far so good. I'm not feeling like any major shifts. I'm sure I'm not as friendly in the morning to my family because I only have one coffee now. But this week, knowing that like this was going to be happening, it kind of required me to say, I still have a work week. I cannot be laying on the floor so exhausted or spending 2 hours preparing meals. It was like, how do I just like do the best I can with this? Because I know that it might be a little uncomfortable. It might take a little time. I was not sure. I was actually really nervous about how I was going to physically react. Um, Seems to be going well so far. Maybe that will change. But it's an act of self-investment because I'm hoping that this shift, this expanding my mind to give myself different nutritional options, especially during the workday, is going to be something that carries forward and ideally pours back into my longevity, my health, my energy. So that is one example. But if I have not a lot of energy, does that mean I should skip my workout completely? No, it might mean today's a yoga day instead of a weight day. These kinds of things actually require you to have a deeper relationship with yourself and have a relationship with yourself that allows you to be flexible. If I had planned my week the way that many people planned, or the people still plan, I would feel like a failure by now. I would feel like, oh, I've missed this. I had to move that. I had to reduce my time here. I had to skip this. But the truth is, if you are a leader, if you are a business owner, that's part of the deal. Things come up that you don't control, but you still are responsible for. A team member gets sick on a day that you're launching something. That's going to throw everything into a bit of chaos. But does it mean that you have to skip every meal? Does it mean that you can't take 5 deep breaths before jumping into your next meeting? So these smaller sustaining rituals are designed to just be little reminders and little ways that you can pour back into yourself and invest in your long-term, ultimately your long-term success and well-being. Another reason I really like the idea of planning being an act of self-investment is because when you are when you're in the thick of things, when it is a really hectic bit of time, and you still manage to like make 5 minutes to do something for yourself, or better yet, if that is tricky for you, if you have an appointment with someone who's going to care for you, could be a body worker, uh, a trainer, a coach, a mentor, something where you actually kind of, you could miss it, but you would pay for it. You're not incentivized to skip this or move this. It is actually not only to your benefit, but it would be a bummer to miss it. Those things as well, I think they're just really good reminders that you, the human behind it all, truly matter. None of what you are creating will come to fruition without you. So this is kind of a fun brain gymnastics exercise I do with clients, but sometimes we'll talk about the $10,000 learning when something goes wrong in the business, when something goes wrong in life. As we've processed it, once we sort of feel like, okay, we're ready to move on, what is the valuable learning from this that would be worth $10,000? I sometimes, when people are having trouble thinking of their calendar not as just the list of things they must do, but also as a way to represent their self-investment, sometimes we'll talk about personal filter and we'll say, like, what is actually worth it to you to get off your calendar? What can you say no to? What do you need to release that it ultimately is going to give you back that $10,000 or more? I was working with a client this week, and they said one of the ways that they're going to get back time on their calendar that they could use to take a walk around the block or to get other valuable work done so that they have their evenings a little more free or their vacations a little more spacious was like reducing the length of meetings. Why do we always schedule meetings for an hour? A lot of our meetings could be 45 minutes, 30 minutes. There's really interesting fixed beliefs, I think, that a lot of us have in business, in leadership, across many different careers. We have things about time that deserve to be questioned. If you could get back 15 minutes today, how could you reinvest that so that you are cared for, so that you can go to bed on time? So this is where planning becomes something that pours back, that is an act of self-investment. And when you start to really trust yourself, it will allow you to get more flexible with your schedule. I love a digital calendar because I can just move things around. I learned this by being a parent, but sometimes people need something. Kids need something that I wasn't expecting to pour an hour into. I now need to figure that out. This is an old favorite. I've talked about it before, but I'll talk about it again because I think it bears repeating. I also love to build in some kind of a buffer time into my calendar, especially on those busy weeks. I lovingly call this holy shit time. It is when you look at your day and you say, holy shit, how am I going to get this done? If you have regular buffers of time for the overflow to go into, for the unexpected to, have a spot, I think it's actually really smart. And I know some people have criticized building those things in because they'll say, oh, but if you leave time aside for, you know, overflow. You'll always have overflow, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that that is true. That has not been true because I know that if I don't use that extra time for something I am working on, it's time back to me. So I like to see if I can give that back to myself. Um, but I think it actually honors that sometimes we do plan Monday morning when we're bright and sparkly with the best of intentions. And we don't always know how our energy is going to ebb and flow. We don't know what fires are going to need to be put out. We don't know because we don't control it. It might be different if you have a very cut and dry, predictable pace of work. I know there's people that have those kinds of jobs, and that's amazing. But for everyone who's in a leadership role, you don't know what's going to happen with your team that week. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't know what your customers are going to need, what things might go down. So it is an act of self-care to allow some flexibility, but then have some of that extra time built in so that you're never feeling rushed and you're never feeling pressured. So I hope that this has been helpful to think about, just reframing, especially if you don't love the idea of making a schedule, if it has always felt very rigid for you, maybe consider that this is an act of self-investment and start to plan the things where you take care of yourself first. This may seem silly. I've shared this before, but it may seem silly, but I mean, I have 30 minutes for lunch on my calendar. I have time in the morning to get ready. I have time blocks for the things that I just have to do every day. But if I didn't see them on the calendar, it would be so easy for me to say, yeah, I can write for 3 hours straight. I probably can write for 3 hours straight, but I might want to eat in that time frame, depending on when it is. I might need to get up and move around. I might need a 15-minute break. That actually is probably, with everything we know, that's probably much healthier in the long term to get up and stretch once an hour or move or jump on my little trampoline, rather than like sit down and sit through it. So I hope this has helped you maybe reframe how you think about planning, not as something that you should dread, not as something where you are competing against yourself and against the clock, but as a way to make sure that your sustaining rituals have a place and a time, to make sure that you are filling your own energy in ways that actually work for you and your physiology and your needs and your lifestyle. And notice if there's things on your calendar that you dread. How can we maybe get rid of those things? How can we reduce the time you're spending on them? How can we delegate them? If you are an entrepreneur and a leader, remember that part of that is having some flexibility, even around things we don't love to do. Some of them you have to do, but some of them you can get support for, help with, or delegate altogether. So hope that this has just given you something to think about, to play with. I'm going to have something coming out next week that could also help you take this a little deeper. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but I'll tell you about that next week. If you follow me on Instagram, be superabound. That is where you're going to find out about it, and I'll mention it here. Let me know how this goes for you. And as always, if you feel like having some support to craft the best lifestyle around the work you do, if you feel like you tend towards burnout, overwhelm, if you're not sure how to make your whole world kind of fit together between your business, your work, your life, that is what I help people do. Everything from thinking partnership on content to mindset coaching on the biggest puzzles that you might not even be aware you are trying to solve. Reach out to me at besuperabound.com planning.com/consultation, and we can book a time to speak about what you might need. And I'll talk to you again soon.